that the president is using armed forces against Venezuela. He did for about 47 minutes this last weekend, but he is not in the process of doing this. And the resolution says that he should stop it. He's not doing it.
You just saw the moment that changed everything. But what caused it was even more damaging once the words were read out loud.
Mr. President, fellow senators, we're about to vote on a war powers resolution, which is becoming common around here and way too common, as a matter of fact. But I think the first thing we ought to talk about is what we're actually doing here from a 30,000-foot standpoint as far as what the resolution actually says. As usual, there's a lot of setup in here, but there's 2.5 lines that says what we're trying to do here. Not we, what the other side is trying to do here. And it says, Congress hereby directs the President to terminate the use of the United States Armed Forces for hostilities within or against Venezuela. Let me say that again. We're directing the President to terminate the use of armed forces for hostilities within or against Venezuela. There isn't anybody that has any information that the president is using armed forces against Venezuela. He did for about 47 minutes this last weekend, but he is not in the process of doing this. And the resolution says that he should stop it. He's not doing it. Now, if the resolution were drawn to say, President, you can't do this anymore, that would actually have some effect, or attempt to have some effect. It would be unconstitutional, unenforceable. But to tell him to not do something or to stop doing something he's not doing is nonsense. The effect of this is to slap the President of the United States in the face. That is the only effect that this vote can have. It can have no practical effect because it's trying to stop something that isn't going on. So, we are again here considering this war powers resolution to remove the troops from a foreign country where they do not exist. The War Powers Act was created as a way to address the continuing deployment of U.S. forces into hostilities or in hostilities. There is no continuing deployment of U.S. forces in hostilities. The War Powers Act was never designed to remove the President's Article II right to defend the United States, its interests, or its citizens. And nor indeed could the War Powers Act do that, because the Constitution absolutely directs the President of the United States to use the military might of the United States to protect it. Indeed, the constitutional power is given to the President. We cannot change that. It is the power that he has. This vote and similar votes before it are an abuse of the War Powers Act. There are no U.S. military forces in Venezuela. The United States conducted a limited operation that removed an indicted narco-terrorist, Nicolas Maduro, from Venezuela and brought him to the United States to face justice for his crimes. Now, was this a good thing to do? Well, of course it was a good thing to do, and indeed, Democrats themselves have said that it was a good thing to do. I want to read from 3 different Democrats who've told us that this was a good thing to do. I'm not going to name them. They can step up and take credit if they want to. But these are 3 different Democrats. The first one said, obviously, we know Maduro and his cronies do not want to go quietly into the night, but the United States needs to work with its partners and allies in the region to ratchet up pressure. This was a senator on August 2nd, 2024. The same senator said, after Maduro was removed, it is an illegal act of war to replace Maduro. Another senator said, and this was back in 2019, if Trump cared about consistency, he would make the realist case for intervention in Venezuela. Getting rid of Maduro is good for the United States. This senator called for intervention in Venezuela. You know what he says now? After the invasion? The invasion of Venezuela was nothing to do with American security. Venezuela is not a security threat to the U.S. That's what he says today. Now, one of my favorites, this senator said, and this was on February 5th, 2020, And the president brags about his Venezuela policy. Give us a break. He hasn't brought an end to the Maduro regime. The Maduro regime is more powerful today and more entrenched today than it was when the president began. Well, the president changed that. He removed Maduro. You know what that same senator says today? This is reckless. And the American people are just this morning in fear of what's going to happen here. That was January 4th, 2026. This is the height of hypocrisy. The purpose of this resolution is to slap the president in the face. It will do nothing that it purports to do because it can't stop something that isn't going on right now. In addition, the president's actions in Venezuela are consistent with other presidents' efforts to protect the American people from threats in our own backyard. President George H.W. Bush authorized limited military operations to arrest Panama's Manuel Noriega and bring him to the United States to stand trial for drug-related charges, just as President Trump's done with Maduro. In that case, President Bush deployed more than 9,000 troops, and they fought for 2 weeks on the ground in Panama before they got their hands on Noriega. At that time, both Republican and Democrat leaders of the Senate praised this move. Compare that to what happened here. There were only about 200 troops involved, and they were engaged for 47 minutes. And yet, all of a sudden, this is a horrendous problem. Thank you very much, Senator. I appreciate that. When you're in the business of flooding drugs into the United States, drugs that kill our children and hurt our country and destabilize our hemisphere in violation of U.S. law, and when you invite in Russia, China, and Iran to set up shop right in our backyard and do the things that they're doing, there's going to be a price to pay. Maduro is paying that price today. But unlike the former president, President Trump demonstrated he is a man of action. He was decisive and did what he promised the American people he would do, and that is to keep them safe. Now Democrats are reversing their position on Maduro's removal to criticize the president. The president's decision was the right call. Let's acknowledge that fact. Let's celebrate that fact. Let's resolve that the president of the United States is to be commended for what he did. My fellow senators, vote no on this resolution. This is nothing more than a slap in the face of the President of the United States. It cannot accomplish something that does not exist. I yield the floor.
The turning point didn't come from rhetoric or accusations. It came from reading the resolution exactly as it was written. No interpretation, no spin, just the language on the page. And that language ordered the president to terminate military action that wasn't happening. No active deployment, no ongoing hostilities, no troops on the ground. That's where the argument collapsed. You can't end what doesn't exist. At that moment, the vote stopped being about authority and started looking like symbolism pretending to be law. If the goal had been to restrict future action, that would have been a real debate. But this wasn't preventative, it was performative. The discussion then turned to the Constitution. The War Powers Act was never meant to erase the president's Article 2 responsibility. It exists to address prolonged, ongoing wars, not short, completed operations that are already over. That's when the record was brought out. Past statements, same voices, same people now condemning the action, calls for pressure, complaints that nothing was being done, arguments that intervention was necessary for American security. Fast forward to today, and those positions are suddenly reversed. Same region, same threat, entirely different outrage. History made the contrast even sharper. Previous presidents authorized far larger operations, thousands of troops, weeks of combat, and were praised by both parties. This operation was limited, targeted, and brief, and yet it's treated as if it crossed some invisible line. The closing reminder was simple. When 4 regimes flood drugs into the United States, destabilize the hemisphere, and invite hostile powers into the region, there are consequences. Action isn't something to condemn after the fact just because it becomes politically inconvenient. This resolution wasn't about stopping a war. It wasn't about defending the Constitution. It was about making a statement. And once the words were read aloud, that statement couldn't survive. If you want more moments like this, you'll want to see what happened next.